Aston Martin might already be out of the fight, and we're only 2 races into the season. After the Chinese Grand Prix, new evidence has surfaced, pointing to a hidden issue inside the Honda engine that's so severe, drivers can't even push the car to its limit. We're talking about violent vibrations, failing systems, lost performance, and now, an FIA investigation that could expose something much bigger across the grid. But here's the part that should worry every team. Because this might not just explain why Aston Martin is collapsing. It could reveal why one team is dominating. And if that connection is confirmed, the entire championship could change. Stay with me, because the real truth behind this story is not what anyone expected. Subscribe now, because what's coming next changes everything. The Chinese Grand Prix didn't just confirm Aston Martin is struggling. It exposed how deep the problem really goes. Because from the very first stint, something felt wrong. Not just a lack of pace. Not just a bad setup. Something unstable. The car wasn't reacting the same way corner after corner. Drivers weren't building confidence. They were losing it. And that changes everything. Because in Formula 1, confidence is performance. And without it, lap time disappears instantly. But that's not the real issue. The real issue is what's causing that loss of confidence. Because underneath the surface, every time the car reached peak load, the same pattern appeared. Acceleration. Energy deployment. And then, instability. A vibration that builds through the system. Subtle at first. Then stronger. Then impossible to ignore. And here's where things get serious. Because this isn't just something the driver feels. It's something the car suffers. The vibration travels from the power unit, into the chassis, and directly into the battery structure. And that creates damage. Not theoretical damage. Real damage. Components wearing faster than expected. Systems losing efficiency. And the team being forced to react, instead of push forward. So what do? They hold back. They reduce deployment. They avoid aggressive settings. And just like that, the car loses performance everywhere. On straights. On exits. On energy recovery. Which explains something that didn't make sense at first. Why Aston Martin looks so far behind, despite the level of engineering behind this project. Because what we're seeing is not the true car. It's a limited version. A controlled version. A version designed to survive the race, not compete in it. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because this behavior is not random. It repeats. Same conditions. Same response. Again and again. And that tells engineers something critical. This is not a setup issue. It's not a small fault. It's built into the system. Which means fixing it is not simple. And that's where the real concern begins. Because if the problem is structural, if it's coming from how the engine, battery, and chassis interact, then solving it requires time, redesign, revalidation. Things you cannot rush during a live season. And while Aston Martin is trying to understand this, other teams are already watching. Because when one car behaves this differently, it raises questions. Serious ones. Why is the energy delivery so unstable? Why does the system react so aggressively under load? And more importantly, what exactly is happening inside that Honda power unit? Because in Formula 1, problems like this don't stay isolated. They lead somewhere. And in this case, that path is already starting to attract attention. Not from the media. Not from fans. From the FIA. And what they are beginning to look at goes far beyond just Aston Martin. But what the FIA is starting to see is where this situation becomes much bigger than Aston Martin. Because this is no longer just about a team struggling. It's about understanding why their system behaves so differently compared to everyone else. After the Chinese Grand Prix, attention shifted toward one key area. Energy behavior under load. Not peak power. Not headline numbers. But how that power is delivered, moment by moment, through an entire lap. And this is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Because while Aston Martin is dealing with instability, another team is showing complete control. Mercedes. Smooth deployment. No visible drop in performance. No signs of stress at the end of straights. No unpredictable behavior under heavy load. And that raises a dangerous question. If both systems operate under the same rules, why do they behave so differently? But that's not the real question. The real question is this. Are they truly operating under the same conditions? Because in Formula 1, how something is measured can be just as important as the rule itself. And right now, there is growing attention around how engines behave at real operating temperatures. Not in a lab. Not in static testing. But on track. At full speed. At full stress. Because what happens in those conditions can reveal things you don't see anywhere else. And this is exactly where suspicions begin. Some engineers believe that certain performance characteristics only appear when the system reaches extreme conditions. Which means something very important. If you're not measuring those exact conditions, you might not be seeing the full picture. And that's where the FIA steps in, quietly gathering data, comparing how different power units behave, looking at patterns across multiple teams. Because if there is even a small gap in interpretation, it has to be understood, and possibly corrected. Now here's where everything connects again. Because while the FIA is analyzing potential advantages, Aston Martin is dealing with a clear disadvantage. Their system is unstable. Their mileage is limited. And that creates a problem most people don't think about. They don't have enough data. And in modern Formula One, data is everything. Without it, you can't develop. You can't correlate simulations. You can't trust your upgrades. And that means one thing. Even if they find a fix, they might not fully understand why it works. And that slows everything down. But here's the twist. Inside Aston Martin, there is a growing realization. This might not be just an engine issue. It's the interaction. The way the power unit connects with the chassis. The way vibrations resonate through the structure. The way energy deployment amplifies those effects under specific conditions. A chain reaction. One problem triggering another. Until the entire system becomes unstable. And once that happens, there is no quick solution. No simple upgrade. No easy reset. Which leads to a very uncomfortable possibility. What if this isn't a temporary issue? What if this is built into the design itself? Because if that's true, then Aston Martin is not just behind. They're fundamentally compromised. And in a season where power units define everything, that could decide their entire year. But there's still one piece missing. One final connection that explains why this situation is not just about Aston Martin, and not just about the FIA, but about who truly understood the new era first. And once you see that, the entire picture changes. And this is the moment where everything finally clicks. Because this was never just about Aston Martin being slow. It was never just about Honda struggling. It was about who understood the new era before it even began. Because the 2026 regulations changed something fundamental. Power is no longer just produced. It's managed. It's distributed. It's controlled with absolute precision. And the teams that saw that early built their entire philosophy around it. Others are still trying to catch up. And this is where Adrian Newey's early warning becomes impossible to ignore. Long before the season started, he made one thing very clear. This era would be dominated by the power unit. Not aerodynamics. Not mechanical grip. Energy. And more importantly, how that energy is integrated into the car. Right now, that prediction is playing out perfectly. Mercedes didn't just build a fast engine. They built a complete system. Engine. Battery. Software. Chassis. Everything working together. Seamlessly. No conflict. No instability. No surprises. And that gives them something incredibly powerful. Confidence. The ability to push every lap, knowing the system will respond exactly as expected. Now compare that to Aston Martin. A car with potential. A design that, on paper, should be competitive. A concept that even rivals described as aggressive and full of ideas. But none of that matters. Because the system doesn't work together. The engine creates instability. The chassis amplifies it. The battery suffers. And the drivers pay the price. So instead of pushing forward, they hold back. And in doing that, they fall further behind. But here's the part that changes how you see this entire situation. Even if Aston Martin solves the vibration issue, even if they stabilize the system, even if they unlock the true performance of the car, they still face a bigger problem. They are already behind in understanding. Because while they were fighting instability, Mercedes was refining perfection, collecting data, improving efficiency, extending their advantage. And in Formula One, that gap grows fast. Race after race, update after update, until it becomes almost impossible to close. But now, bring the FIA back into this. Because this is where things could still shift. If the investigation leads to new measurements, if certain interpretations are restricted, if the way performance is evaluated changes, then suddenly, the gap at the front could shrink. Not because Aston improves instantly, but because others are forced to adjust. And that is the only scenario where Aston Martin gets a second chance. Not through dominance. Not through immediate performance. But through time. Time to fix. Time to understand. Time to rebuild. Because without that, the reality is brutal. They are chasing a moving target, while standing still. And that never ends well. So now everything comes down to one final truth. This season will not be decided by who builds the fastest car. It will be decided by who understands the system first, who controls energy best, who can push to the limit without breaking it. Right now, Aston Martin can't. Mercedes can. And the FIA might be the only factor that can change that balance. So the real question is no longer just about Aston Martin. It's about the entire championship. Because if this gap continues to grow, then the title fight might already be slipping away. And if the FIA steps in, then everything we think we understand could change overnight. And this is where the story stops being technical and becomes something much harder to fix. Because up to now, everything could still be explained. New regulations, new partnership, early season problems. But after 2 races, that explanation starts to fall apart. Because what Aston Martin is facing now is not just a technical deficit. It's a structural crisis. Not in the car alone. In the entire project. Because when a team cannot trust its own machine, everything else breaks with it. Strategy becomes limited. Drivers lose confidence. Engineers stop chasing performance and start chasing stability. And that shift is devastating. Because Formula One rewards aggression, not hesitation. And right now, Aston Martin is hesitating. Every decision is cautious. Every run is controlled. Every lap is compromised. And that creates something invisible but incredibly damaging. Momentum loss. While other teams build rhythm, Aston Martin is resetting every weekend. Trying something new. Hoping for a different result. But getting pulled back by the same problem. Again. And again. And again. And this is where the psychological pressure starts to build. Inside the garage. Inside the engineering room. Inside the drivers' minds. Because they know something the outside world is just beginning to realize. This is not a quick fix. This is not one upgrade away. This is deep. And the deeper the problem, the harder it becomes to solve under pressure. Now add one more layer to this. Because while Aston Martin is dealing with internal instability, the outside pressure is growing. The FIA is watching. Rivals are asking questions. Comparisons are being made. And every race adds more data, more evidence, more attention. And in Formula One, attention is dangerous. Because once the spotlight turns toward you, everything gets examined. Every detail, every decision, every weakness. And Aston Martin right now has too many of them. But here's the part that makes this even more critical. Time is not just moving forward. It's accelerating. Because development cycles don't wait. Upgrades are already coming from other teams. Refinements are already being implemented. And every improvement from the front pushes Aston further back. Not just in performance. In possibility. Because there comes a point in every season where recovery is no longer realistic. Where the gap is not just large. It's permanent.